You ruined our lives. Get out. That's what my daughter-in-law Tricia screamed at me while my son Martin just stood behind her without saying a word. My granddaughter, Kayla, picked up a slipper and threw it at me, and my grandson, Dylan, just stared without blinking. No one tried to help me. No one told them to stop. So I quietly packed one bag and walked out into the cold night. A month later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Over 50 missed calls lit up the screen. When I finally checked the messages, all it said was, "Mom, please, it's about Dylan. He's missing." That's when it hit me. They weren't calling to say sorry. They were only calling because their big lie was about to fall apart. I don't even remember what I was doing when all this started. Probably folding towels like I always did around that time. Then suddenly, the yelling began. "You ruined our lives. You ruined us." Tricia's voice was sharp and loud, shouting from the kitchen. Kayla, their 22-year-old daughter, started screaming too. "You had to open your big mouth." And Simone, Tricia's little sister, who liked to hang around the house as if she lived there, piped up from the couch. "Well, say something, Evie. You're proud of yourself." I stepped into the hallway, still holding one of Martin's old t-shirts. They were all lined up like they'd practiced this moment. Tricia wore her fancy silk robe, her face red and twisted with anger. She held some papers I didn't recognize. Martin just stood there, arms crossed, mouth shut like he always did when things got ugly. He didn't defend me. He never did. "What did I do?" I asked. My voice was calm, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Kayla laughed in a cold, mean way. "Don't pretend you don't know. You talked, and now we're screwed." I looked at Martin, hoping he'd explain, but he turned his eyes away. Tricia took a step closer, waving the papers in my face. "Everything we've built is gone because you can't keep your mouth shut." I was confused. I hadn't told anyone anything about them. I never gossiped. I barely left the house. I just kept to myself like they always wanted. "If you're going to yell at me, fine," I said softly. "But at least tell me what I'm being blamed for." Simone rolled her eyes and folded her arms. "Oh, now she wants to talk. Now she wants an explanation." Tricia shoved the papers right up under my nose. "Do you even get what you said about Martin's work? You told people who report this stuff." My stomach sank. I remembered the call from the doctor's office a week earlier. The woman asked some questions about our income, and I'd mentioned that Martin sometimes picked up side jobs, even though he was getting disability checks. I hadn't meant it in a bad way. I thought I was just making small talk. Martin finally spoke, cutting me off. "You didn't think. That's always been your problem." I felt my legs go weak. My hands were numb. From down the hall, Dylan stood, half hidden in the shadows with his earbuds in. He didn't say a word. He didn't even blink. Kayla grabbed a slipper and flung it at the wall behind me. "You've done enough damage. Get out," she spat. Tricia nodded like this was all decided long ago. "You're not staying in this house another night." I walked slowly to my room. No one tried to stop me. I set the t-shirt in my bag, took my coat, my purse, and my pills, and left everything else behind. As I zipped up my bag, I could hear them in the kitchen, still talking, still venting, maybe even celebrating. Simone said something like, "Took long enough." I walked past Dylan, who didn't move an inch. I opened the front door. Cold air hit my face, but I didn't care anymore. I stepped outside with no car, no plan, and still no real idea what I had. Ruined before all this, the house had felt exactly the same, quiet, strict, heavy with tension. I woke up every morning at 6, not because anyone needed me to, but because I'd done it for 40 years. I'd make coffee, fold the towels Tricia left in the dryer overnight, and wipe down the counters before anyone else was awake. No one asked me to. No one thanked me. That was just the way it was. Dylan would walk through the kitchen around 7, eyes glued to his phone. Kayla never came downstairs before 10, and usually complained about some headache or a job she didn't want to go to. Tricia would stroll in mid-morning, eyebrows already raised, checking her phone and telling me she wished the house could be quieter. And that was my life. Until it wasn single quotes. I always tried my best to stay invisible. That was the unspoken rule in the house, even if no one ever said it out loud. Martin, my son, worked nights sometimes and sometimes he didn't. I stopped asking why a long time ago. There were stretches when he'd stay home for weeks, saying his back hurt or there was some problem with paperwork. All I really knew was that whenever money got tight, he and Trisha would start fighting, and the air in the house felt like it could snap. I didn't ask questions because asking just turned me into a problem. My room was really the guest room, squeezed in the back near the laundry machines. There wasn't even a window, just a little vent that made odd clunking sounds at night. My things were all piled in plastic bins because the closet was stuffed full of Trisha's heavy winter coats and Kayla's extra shoes. I had one drawer, that was actually mine, and I never complained. I kept telling myself, they let me stay here. That's good enough. Around that time, Simone started showing up more and more. She didn't live there, but you'd never know it. She'd walk in without knocking, help herself to the coffee I bought, and tossed little comments my way like, still hanging around, huh, Evie. Trisha never told her to stop, and Martin acted like he didn't even see it. Simone had this way of making me feel like I didn't belong in my own son's house. She'd flip through the mail like it was hers or put her feet up on the table while she watched TV. Kayla adored her. They acted more like sisters than Kayla did with her own mom. The whole place felt like a little club I wasn't invited to. One morning, I was making toast when Simone walked in wearing Trisha's robe, like she owned everything. She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "Hey, Evie," she said in this fake sweet voice that felt more like vinegar than sugar. "You talked to anyone at the clinic lately?" I looked up, caught off guard. "Just some insurance lady." "Why?" She shrugged, pretending not to care. "Just curious. They always ask a bunch of nosy questions, don't they?" I nodded. "Yeah. Just the usual who lives here, what everyone does." She smiled too big, like she was hiding something. "Hope you didn't say anything they could twist around. The government's tricky like that." I remember frowning, but I didn't think much of it then. I went back to folding the towels and wiping down the counters, just trying to stay out of everyone's way. But the way she looked at me stuck in my mind, like she knew something I didn't. Like she'd planted a seed on purpose and was waiting to see what would grow. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those days when nothing feels urgent. I was in the kitchen folding napkins when my cell phone rang. Just a normal follow-up call from the clinic. I'd gone in for my blood pressure and to refill a prescription. The woman on the line was polite, reading off her form, asking if my address was the same, who else lived in the house, and if anyone helped pay the bills. I answered honestly without thinking. "My son Martin owns the house," I said. "He's on disability, but he picks up little cash jobs now and then to help out." That was the truth. I didn't say it to get him in trouble. I didn't even think it was a secret. I figured everybody did whatever they could to get by. The woman didn't react much, just said "ma'am," and moved on to her next question. The whole call was maybe 10 minutes. I hung up and started wiping the counter again. That's when I noticed Simone sitting at the kitchen island, watching me with this sly little smile. "They ask a lot of weird questions, don't they?" she said. I turned, surprised. "I didn't see you there. Didn't need to be seen," she replied, still smirking. Then she added, "Hope you didn't say anything too spicy." I frowned, feeling a twist in my stomach. "Just the usual who lives here, what we all do, nothing strange." She raised her eyebrows and said, like she was delivering some kind of warning, "You know the government doesn't play when it comes to income, right?" Then she slid off the stool and walked away, still smiling like she knew a secret. My stomach twisted in a way I couldn't quite explain, but I tried to ignore it. I went on with the day like nothing had happened. That night, Martin came home, late and barely even looked at me. Trisha didn't say a word. Kayla was out, and Dylan stayed upstairs. The whole house felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were mad at me. The next day, a thick white envelope showed up in the mail. It was addressed to Martin. He opened it without saying anything, read the first page, then stuffed it under a magazine and acted like it wasn't even there. Trisha turned her head and looked at me with eyes that were flat and cold. "Did you say anything on that call?" she asked all of a sudden. I blinked. "What call?" "Your doctor or whoever. They asked about who lives here, income, that stuff." I just told them the truth, I said, feeling my heart start to pound. "What truth?" Her voice got sharper, like a knife. "About Martin doing little side jobs sometimes." Why? Trisha just stared at me, and something in her face went hard. "You know he's not supposed to report any income while he's on disability, right?" My mouth went dry. I hadn't meant to get anyone in trouble. I was just answering questions. From the hallway, Simone called out in a fake sweet voice, "Oops, cat's out of the bag now." I stood there, frozen. Martin didn't say a word. He just closed the envelope and set it aside like it was nothing. I didn't fully understand what I'd done, not yet. But I could feel something had changed. And for the first time in weeks, nobody left the room when I walked in. They stayed right there so they could watch me, glare at me, and wait for me to squirm. Within 2 days, everything in the house felt different. I woke up the next morning to hear Trisha on the phone, pacing the hallway, her voice so sharp it cut right through the walls. "I don't care what the paperwork says. We were never notified, and now everything's frozen. How is that even legal?" I stayed in my room. That's what I'd taught myself to do over the years: stay quiet, stay invisible. But her words still slipped through the drywall. "Yes, he's on disability. No, I don't know why this is happening. No, I don't know who told them." Then came the click of the call ending. I waited another hour before I finally came out to the kitchen. The TV was off, and the air felt sucked out, like some disaster had happened overnight. Martin was sitting at the table in the same t-shirt he'd slept in, staring at a pile of mail. Trisha turned to me the moment I stepped in. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying all night. "You said too much, Evelyn." That's all she said at first. I opened my mouth to explain, but she kept going. "You told them about the side work. That's what did it. They flagged everything. Now the checks are paused. Our benefits are frozen. The rent help is stopped, everything." Martin still wouldn't look at me. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "It wasn't meant to hurt anyone." "You think your intentions matter when the money's gone?" Trisha snapped. "You told a system that doesn't care. Now they're digging." I turned to Martin. "Say something," I whispered, almost begging. He let out a sigh through his nose but didn't lift his eyes. "You should have known better," he said flatly. That was all he gave me. I backed out of the room, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might fall. My mind kept spinning, replaying every word from that call, over and over. What exactly had I said? Had I really used the word work? I couldn't remember anymore. The next day, Simone showed up earlier than usual. She never knocked. She just strolled right in, acting like she owned the place. She looked around and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "So, I hear our house snitch caused a big government scare." Kayla sat at the counter eating cereal and laughed without even looking up from her phone. "She's a liability, Mom. Honestly, why is she even here?" Trisha muttered something I couldn't catch, and then added, "She's lucky we even gave her a room." I waited a little while, then walked out like nothing was wrong. Nobody looked at me. I walked past them to get a glass of water, and I could feel how they were all deliberately ignoring me, like I wasn't even there. Simone took a sip of coffee and tilted her head to the side. "Maybe you're just getting forgetful, Evelyn. Old brains can't always tell what's private and what's not." Kayla giggled. "We should get her one of those baby monitors. See what else she blurts out." My hands shook as I poured the water, but I didn't say anything, because by then, I understood this wasn't confusion or even plain anger. This was a plan, a punishment. They weren't just upset, they were getting ready to push me out. And none of them, not even my own son, was going to stop it. 3 days after that envelope came, after all the silent treatments and cold shoulders, I knew for sure the damage was permanent. I kept waiting for someone to calm down, to maybe admit this had all gotten out of hand, but no one ever did. I never meant to hurt anybody, but things just kept getting worse. The house turned into a stage, and I felt like a prop they all moved around. I overheard Simone one day talking to someone on speakerphone. She was saying, "Evelyn's losing it. She's becoming a problem." Then she did this fake whisper, loud enough that I knew she wanted me to hear. "And she's not even paying rent." That night, Trisha and Simone announced they were having a girls' night at the house. They hadn't done that in months. I stayed in my room, hoping maybe it would be quiet, but I was wrong. The music wasn't even that loud, but the laughter was the kind that feels mean on purpose. It was the sort you could tell was meant to travel through the walls and find me. I heard glasses clinking, heels tapping on the floor, and my name maybe tossed around like I was some kind of bad joke. I tried to block it out until I heard Kayla shout, wait, let me do the impression." Then she put on this high, squeaky voice. "Well, the government asked me, so I told them everything about my hardworking son." The whole room burst into laughter. Simone called out, "Don't forget the part where she says, 'I didn't know, I wasn't supposed to.'" More cackling. Trisha yelled, "Oh my God, that's too real." I sat there on my bed, frozen, staring at the door like any second it might fly open. It felt like being bullied in high school all over again, but this time, I was an old woman, and it was my own family. My hands clenched so tight, I left little half-moons from my fingernails in my palms. Then came the worst part, Kayla's voice, giggling. Should we just make it easy and push her out? I mean, how long are we going to pretend she's not a parasite? Simone jumped in. I say we make her leave on her own. That way, no one has to feel bad. And Trisha finished it off with this cold little laugh. Oh honey, the seeds are already planted. I didn't cry, I didn't storm out. I just sat there, listening to them laugh, feeling like I was shrinking smaller and smaller until I was nothing at all. All in the same house I'd helped pay for when Martin was 22, broke, and begging me for help. They didn't want me gone right away. They wanted me broken enough to leave on my own. The next morning, no one even mentioned the party. Not one word. They all sat there smiling over coffee like nothing had happened. Kayla wore sunglasses at breakfast. Simone was already on her phone when I walked out to make tea. It was all a show. And I finally understood this wasn't about what I'd said on that phone call. That was just the excuse. They'd wanted me out for a long time. They were just waiting for the right moment to make it look like my fault. The night I finally left wasn't dramatic. There was no yelling, no plates breaking, no one grabbing my arm and begging me to stay. It was worse. It was quiet, calm, like they had all agreed, without saying a word, that I didn't belong there anymore. Trisha made chicken for dinner, but no one offered me a plate. Kayla walked past me like I was a lamp. She didn't notice. Simone sat at the table, sipping wine and laughing at something on her phone, her feet propped up on the chair I usually sat in. No one spoke to me. No one even looked at me. The message was clear. You are not welcome here. I ate 2 crackers and half a banana alone in my room. Lights off, the TV on mute so I could have a little noise that wasn't their voices. Around 9, I stepped out to put my mug in the sink. Martin was sitting on the couch, arms folded, staring at the TV like he hated it. Martin, I said. He didn't turn. Martin, I tried again, softer. Can we talk for a second? Nothing. Trisha came out of the laundry room, saw me, and said, still here? That was it. No sarcasm, no yelling, just a flat, tired voice like my being. There was an inconvenience she was tired of pretending about. Simone chuckled under her breath. Kayla came down the stairs in her slippers, took one look at me, and made a face like she smelled something sour. Don't hover, she muttered. That was the moment, not because it was the worst thing they'd said to me that week, but because it was the moment they stopped pretending. They weren't hiding it anymore. I turned around, walked down the hall, and closed my door without a sound. I took my time packing. I didn't own much, just a few changes of clothes, my photo album, my medicine, and a small envelope of emergency cash I'd hidden in a pair of socks. I folded everything neatly, checked the drawers twice, and left the spare house key on the desk. I didn't leave a note. They didn't deserve one. I zipped my bag slowly, trying to keep my hands from shaking. It wasn't fear. It was something colder, something older, like the deep, heavy kind of sadness that doesn't need tears. When I opened the door to leave, Dylan was standing in the hallway. My grandson, 17. The only one in that house who hadn't done anything to hurt me, but he hadn't helped me, either. He stood there frozen, holding a water bottle, his earbuds hanging around his neck. I'm leaving, I said. I'm leaving, I said softly. He didn't say anything, didn't ask why. He just nodded once, like he already knew this moment was coming. I walked past him with my bag over my shoulder. The hallway light flickered once. Kayla's door was open, and I could hear her laughing at something on her phone. Martin never looked away from the TV. Trisha didn't come out. Simone didn't even blink. I opened the front door. The cold, damp air rushed over me. I didn't have a car, no plan, nowhere certain to go, but I stepped out anyway. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. And I didn't expect I'd ever come back. The place I found wasn't much, a single-room studio behind a nail salon. The walls were so thin, I could hear everything, and the door locks stuck almost every time I tried to turn the key. But it was mine. And, most important of all, it was quiet. I paid the first month's rent in cash and didn't leave my name. The landlord didn't care enough to ask. The only furniture was a metal bed frame, a nightstand with a drawer that always stuck, and a chipped dresser that leaned to one side like it was too tired to stand up straight. I unpacked, slow and careful. I put my folded clothes in the bottom drawer, slid my photo album under the bed, and taped a little note above the sink that said, "Breathe. You're not there anymore." I wasn't scared at first, just tired all the way to my bones. Every morning, I made instant oatmeal, watched reruns of old game shows with the volume turned low, and listened to my neighbors argue about lottery tickets and whose turn it was to do laundry. It was funny how even peace could sound noisy when you hadn't felt it in so long. For the first few days, my phone was quiet. No calls, no texts, no fake concern from Trisha, no guilt from Martin. I told myself this was what I needed to disappear, to finally breathe. But silence turns mean when it hangs around too long. By the end of the second week, I kept catching myself glancing at my phone a little too often, scrolling through my contacts and stopping on Dylan's name. But I never called him. I didn't want to drag him into all of it. He'd stayed out of the mess, or so I thought. The first missed call came on a Sunday morning while I was pouring tea. Martin's name popped up on the screen. I stared at it, let it ring, then flipped the phone face down. 5 minutes later, Trisha called, then Kayla, all in a row. I didn't pick up any of them. An hour passed, and another number rang, one I didn't recognize. Then, 2 voicemails came in. I didn't check them, not yet. That night, I turned the phone off completely and buried it under a towel. The next morning was worse. 10 missed calls, 3 new voicemails, and a couple of texts from Martin. The first text read, "We need to talk. It's about Dylan." The second text only said one word, "Please." That one word stopped me cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone heavy in my hands, my heart thumping so hard I thought it might crack. Whatever was happening, I knew this wasn't them trying to say sorry. They needed something from me. After everything, I finally made myself listen to one voicemail. It was Kayla's voice, but this time she didn't sound cruel. She sounded scared, her voice small and shaky. "Grandma, please. He's missing. Dylan's gone. We can't find him. Just call back if you hear anything." Okay. My whole body went stiff. I played it again and again. Missing. Gone. My mind raced through every awful thought, every dark street, every cold night he could be out there alone. I hadn't called him, hadn't checked on him, hadn't even asked if he was okay after I left. I turned the phone off again, not out of anger this time, because I literally couldn't breathe. In a month, none of them had cared if I was alive. Now they were all blowing up my phone. And the only thought I could hold on to was this: Dylan had always been the quiet one, the watcher, the kid who never yelled. If he had run off, something must have pushed him to it. And deep down, I had a sick feeling I already knew what. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I lay there on the creaky old mattress, my phone turned face down on the nightstand, staring up at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a crooked heart. Every sound outside made me jump: a car horn, footsteps, someone slamming a dumpster. Every time I thought of Dylan, my chest squeezed so tight I couldn't get a full breath. By morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned the phone on, and all the notifications poured in: 17 missed calls, 3 more voicemails, a handful of texts, all of them saying the same thing: he's missing. He left a note. We don't know where he is. Please call us. I didn't trust them, not after everything they'd done, but I couldn't ignore it either. I called his school. The secretary transferred me to the counselor, a woman named Ms. Reed. She remembered me from one parent-teacher night years ago. She paused before she spoke, and I could hear it in her voice. She knew something I didn't. "He's been having a hard time at home lately," she said gently. "He told me he wished he could live with you." I froze. "Did something happen?" I asked. The counselor lowered her voice. "Last week, he got into a fight with his sister. He told me she called him weak for defending you. Then she kicked him out of her room and told him to go live with his precious grandma if he loved her so much." Her words felt like a punch to the chest. My face got hot. "Did he leave school?" I asked, my voice shaking. "No," she said quickly. "He came back the next day, but he was quiet. I told him he could always talk to me if something happened." That was the last real conversation we had. I hung up and sat right in the middle of the bed. My hands were locked together so tight my knuckles turned white. All those voicemails and calls, they'd made it sound like he'd just vanished, like it was some big, sudden crisis. But the truth was, he was pushed out, maybe not with hands, but with words meant to hurt. They'd made him feel like he didn't belong. And then they tried to blame me, like I was the one who had abandoned him. My phone started ringing again. "Trisha." I let it ring, Then Simone. Declined. Then Martin. This time, I answered. Hello, I said, keeping my voice calm and cold. There was a pause. Mom, he said. His voice cracked a little. For a moment, he sounded like the scared young man he used to be, the one who'd call me from gas stations when his car broke down. What happened? I asked. He's gone, Martin said. His words came out flat, tired. We're doing everything we can. The police said they'll file a report if he doesn't come back tonight. We don't know where he is. He didn't take his phone. I didn't answer right away. I let the quiet sit there. We thought, maybe he came to you? He added. Why would he do that? I asked. Another pause. Because, he said softly, you're the only person he still talks about like he trusts. That landed right in my chest. I didn't tell him what the counselor had said. I didn't tell him I knew Kayla had shoved him out, or that I could picture Simone sitting there smirking while Dylan packed a bag. All I said was, if I hear from him, I'll let you know. Then I hung up. I sat there gripping the edge of the bed, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. This wasn't some accident. This wasn't a kid who just ran away for fun. This was what happens when someone finally sees the truth about the people around them, and those people don't want to be seen. And if Dylan showed up at my door, I already knew one thing for sure. I wasn't sending him back. It was just past noon the next day when my phone rang again. An unknown number. No voicemail, just one ring that cut off. I stared at the screen, then hit redial, bracing myself for silence or a scam recording. But someone picked up. Hello? A young man's voice, nervous. I didn't recognize it. This is Evelyn, I said slowly. I'm trying to reach Dylan. There was a pause, then a shaky breath. Yeah, hang on. I heard the phone shift, a door creak, and then his voice. Grandma, he said. His voice was small and thin, like he hadn't spoken in hours. Dylan, I breathed. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm safe, he said right away. I'm with Malik. He let me crash at his place. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to go to school today and have them call home. My knees gave out, and I sank down onto the edge of the bed. Are you hurt? Do you need anything? I asked. No, he said. His voice was shaking now. Just, can I come to you? That question cracked something in me. Of course, I said. Anytime. Right now. He was quiet for a second. Then he asked, they lied, didn't they? They made it sound like I ran away. But they kicked me out. I didn't have to ask what happened. I already knew. But I wanted to hear it from him. What did they say to you? I asked gently. Kayla called me a traitor, he said. His voice got tight, like he was fighting tears. She said I was pathetic for defending you. She said if I loved you so much, I should just go live with you. He sniffed. Then she opened my door and threw my stuff into the hall. Trisha didn't say anything. Simone laughed, and Martin, he told me to just let it go, to stop being dramatic. I closed my eyes. My hands were trembling. You didn't do anything wrong, I said quietly. They just didn't like that. You saw them for who they really are. He didn't say anything right away. Then he whispered, I didn't want you to leave. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how. I know, I said. You don't have to explain anything to me. Can you come get me? He asked. Malik's place is a couple neighborhoods over. I can send you the address. Yes, I said right away. I'll be there as soon as I can. He texted me the address as soon as we hung up. I grabbed my coat, picked up my bag, and walked out without looking back. The bus ride felt endless. Every stop made my heart race, like it was a test to see how badly I wanted to get to him. Every loud noise outside made me check my phone to be sure he hadn't changed his mind. When I finally arrived, he was sitting on the front steps, his hoodie pulled up over his head, a duffel bag at his feet. He stood up when he saw me, and for a moment, I thought he might break down right there on the sidewalk, but he didn't. Instead, he hugged me, not some quick, polite hug, but the kind that says, "You're the only person who ever made me feel safe." I hugged him back just as hard. On the bus ride home, we hardly said a word. He kept his hood up, head down, earbuds in. I didn't push him to talk. I knew he just needed a moment to breathe. When we got to my little apartment, he looked around slowly like he was seeing a whole new world. It was small, sure, but calm. He whispered, "This already feels better." I made him some tea and let him sit in the quiet. He didn't ask about his parents. He didn't say their names. He just unpacked his things little by little, folded his clothes neatly, and put his phone face down on the nightstand like he didn't want it to exist. That night, he slept like a rock. No yelling, no doors slamming, no voices calling him names, just peace, just the two of us. And for the first time since I'd left that house, I didn't feel alone. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door, sharp and fast, like whoever it was didn't plan to wait for me to answer. I already knew it was them before I even peeked through the peephole. Trisha was standing there in a beige trench coat, like she was trying to look important. Martin was next to her, staring at his shoes like a teenager caught cheating. I didn't open the door right away. I let them knock again and again. Finally, I cracked it just enough to step halfway into the doorway. "We just want to talk," Trisha said quickly, her eyes flicking past me, searching for Dylan. "This isn't a fight," Martin added, still refusing to look me in the eye. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door a little wider and stepped aside. They walked in like they owned the place and sat right down at my small kitchen table like it was some business meeting. Trisha crossed her legs and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We're here because we're worried," she started, "about Dylan. About how all this looks." I raised an eyebrow. "How it looks to who?" She hesitated. "The school, the neighbors, child services. He's 17. People are asking questions." I leaned against the counter. "And whose idea was it to throw his things in the hallway?" Her smile disappeared. Martin shifted in his chair. "He was acting out," he muttered. "He called us out in front of everyone. He said we were abusive. You know how that sounds to people." "It sounds like he was telling the truth," I said calmly. "He was scared. You just didn't like that." Trisha sat up straighter. "You don't know what it's like raising 2 kids, managing bills, dealing with a sister who never leaves, and a mother-in-law you wanted gone from day one," I finished for her. "Let's not pretend this is about Dylan's well-being. This is about saving face." Her mouth twitched, but she didn't deny it. Martin finally looked at me. "Is he okay?" he asked. His voice was small. "He hasn't answered any of our calls. He's safe," I said. "And no, he doesn't want to come back. He made that very clear." Trisha let out a sharp little laugh. "He's a child. He doesn't get to decide everything. He's 17, I said. "Old enough to know when he's being manipulated. Old enough to know who actually shows up when things go bad." She leaned forward. "So what do you think you can? Just keep him here? You live in a shoebox." "Better a shoebox full of peace," I said, "than a house full of poison." The silence after that was thick. They looked at each other, then back at me. "So what do you want?" Martin asked. "You're just going to keep him?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Unless he tells me otherwise." Trish's voice got higher. "You don't have custody. You don't have rights. We were trying to make this civil." I walked over to the door and opened it wide. "If you were trying to be civil," I said, "you wouldn't have waited until your lie started to fall apart before you showed up. Dylan isn't your shield. He's not here to clean up your mess. He's a kid you hurt because he dared to care about someone you decided didn't matter." Neither of them moved. "If he wants to talk to you," I said quietly, "he'll let you know. Until then, don't come back." They stood up slowly. Trisha glared at me like she wanted to spit out something nasty, but for once, she kept her mouth shut. Martin nodded once, then followed her out. I locked the door behind them. A few minutes later, Dylan came out of the bathroom. He didn't ask who it was. He just looked at me and said, "Did you tell them everything they needed to hear?" I said. He nodded and went back to brushing his teeth. That night, we made grilled cheese sandwiches and watched a silly comedy on mute. Neither of us laughed much, but it was quiet. It was ours. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's story. I was finally living my own. I made an appointment at the Family Legal Aid Center. I walked there with all my papers stuffed in an old grocery bag. I sat in a plastic chair for almost an hour while Dylan stayed at my place doing his schoolwork on the little kitchen table. When they finally called my name, I met with a woman named Ms. Harlow. She was in her 40s, efficient and no-nonsense, and she asked the kind of questions I'd never been brave enough to answer out loud before. Has he been abandoned? Physically? Harmed? Denied food or school? I told her everything carefully, honestly, without trying to make it sound worse than it was. I explained how they targeted him emotionally and threw him out, how I had voicemails and texts, how his school counselor had said he didn't feel safe. I even showed her the call logs and the social media posts Kayla made the night I left, including one with her smirking caption. We finally pushed the parasite out. Ms. Harlow's face barely changed. But I noticed how she started taking faster notes. "You're not his legal guardian," she said. "But based on what you've shown me, we can file for emergency temporary custody." My stomach fluttered. "Will it work?" "It depends on the judge," she said. "But you're on solid ground." She tapped the printed messages. I left that office with the paperwork in my bag and my back a little straighter than it had been in weeks. When I got home, Dylan was still sitting exactly where I'd left him, headphones on, a plate of toast beside him. He looked up and gave me a small, hopeful smile. I told him what I'd done. He nodded, like he already knew I would. "You don't have to fight them," he said softly. "I'm not going back there. I'm not fighting them for them," I said. "I'm doing it so no one can take you away from where you're finally safe." The week crawled by as we waited for the hearing. I cleaned the apartment over and over. I cooked more food than either of us could eat. Dylan started sleeping. Beto, he cracked a few more jokes. He didn't flinch when the neighbors slammed their door. One night, he showed me a pencil drawing he'd done for art class. It was a small apartment with light pouring through a window, 2 chairs at a table. It looked exactly like my place. I didn't cry, but I kept that drawing under my pillow. For days, the hearing finally came. It wasn't dramatic, no courtroom speeches or shouting, just a judge, 2 lawyers, and a pile of evidence. Martin didn't show up. Trisha did, but she hardly spoke. Her lawyer tried to say I'd manipulated Dylan, but the judge read the texts, the voicemails, the counselor's letter. He looked at me, then Dylan, then Trisha, and then he signed the order, temporary custody granted. I walked out of that courthouse holding Dylan's hand like he was 5 again, not 17. We didn't say anything on the ride home. We didn't need to. That night, I made mac and cheese with real butter, not the powdered kind. We ate it sitting on the floor because we still didn't have a real table, and it didn't matter. Because that night, I knew no one could take him from me. No one could silence us again. The family that used guilt and control to keep me small had just lost the only person who ever truly saw me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ending the cycle. It's been 2 months since the court gave me temporary custody. In all that time, not a single person from that house has knocked on my door. No calls, no voicemails, no Simone, no Kayla, no Trisha, trying to pretend they were sorry. Even Martin stayed gone. At first, I thought maybe they were regrouping, getting ready to fight me in court. But the silence stayed, and I realized why. They didn't lose Dylan by accident. They let him go the moment he stopped being useful. He wasn't their golden boy anymore, their obedient buffer. He was mine now, not in a way you own a person, but in the way someone chooses you when everyone else tells them to leave. Our little apartment is still small, still cheap, still loud from the nail salon downstairs. But now there's art on the walls, drawings, grocery lists taped to the fridge, 2 chairs instead of 1. I make breakfast, and he actually eats it. He does his schoolwork on the couch while I knit or read or water the fake plant by the window I keep forgetting isn't real. We laugh sometimes, not every day, but enough. Enough to remember what it feels like to be safe. The other day, Dylan asked me if I'd ever go back to the old house, not to live, just to talk. I told him the truth. I didn't leave because they kicked me out, I said. I left because I finally realized they were never going to stop trying to convince me I didn't matter. He didn't say anything, just nodded and passed me the last piece of toast. I don't know what the future looks like. I'm not naive. I know temporary custody isn't permanent. But for now, he's here with me. He's choosing this. And I won't let anyone take that from him again. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the moment I walked out of that house, how cold the air was, how alone I felt, how ashamed, but not anymore. Not here. Here, we are finally free. I used to feel like I'd failed somehow, but now I see it differently. I didn't fail. I survived. I adapted. I protected the only person who ever really saw me beyond by doing that. I finally learned how to protect myself, too. They said I ruined their lives. They screamed it like it was the truth. But the real truth is, I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped lying for them. I stopped covering for them. I walked away from the role they wanted me to play, quiet, small, disposable, and I took their scapegoat with me. Now he's just a boy doing his homework in a warm apartment. And I'm just a woman making tea in a quiet room, no longer afraid to hear her own voice. I didn't ruin their lives. They tried to ruin mine, and they failed.